Welcome to Macroeconomics exercise class session 6 on labor market model and ASAD model. We have already seen the labor market model and now we would shift on to the ASAD model, which is concerning expansionary fiscal policy and contractionary monetary policy. Problem number 20 on ASAD model, expansionary fiscal policy, states that there is an increase in government expenditure in an ASAD model. So we want to show graphically how this shock can be drawn in a price income diagram, which is the ASAD model, and interest rate income diagram, which is the ISLA model. We are required to mark the relationship between both diagrams. Then we would explain verbally the effect of the increase in government expenditure. Our starting assumption is that prices are constant. Then we would explain the effects of ASAD model in the short term and in the medium term. We would also look at the change of income, interest rate, and price level in each step in order to compare it with the initial equilibrium level indicated. For that, we have already a pre-set up of our ASAD and ISLA model. We would just put the levels so as to know which curve is representing what. So this curve is representing our aggregate demand at 0, and this is our aggregate supply at 0. In our ISLA model, we have IS 0 and LM 0. So here we have a point of equilibrium in A where our price level is to be set as PA. In our ISLA model, we have also a similar equilibrium in point A where our interest rate is to be indicated as IA, and our income level in this regard is to be represented by YA. So we have said that there is an increase in government expenditure. So this increase in government expenditure leads to an increase in excess demand in our economy. So this is to say the increase in government expenditure in the form of expansionary fiscal policy leads to an excess demand in the goods market. So the excess demand in the goods market as a result of an expansionary fiscal policy is to be represented by a shift of our AD curve outwards or an increase in our aggregate demand. So due to our increased government expenditure as expansionary fiscal policy, we have a shift from AD0 to AD1 in our aggregate demand, aggregate supply diagram. We have said that price level is constant, so we would reach at a point where we have the level of aggregate demand to be at point B. So at point B, our income would be indicated to be YB. We have said that due to the increase in government expenditure, there is excess demand, and this excess demand is actually balanced by the increase in production. So if there is an excess demand in the market, producers would tend to produce more so as to satisfy this excess demand. If producers are producing more, this is directly implicating to an increase in income. So that's why we are saying there is an increase from YA to YB. And in our ISLM model, the increase in government expenditure is already discussed, and there would be a shift in our investment savings curve IS to a new level which should be indicated as IS1. So this increase again is also as a result of increase in government expenditure G. So moving on, we have said that there is an increase in aggregate demand in our ASAD model. If there is an increase in aggregate demand, since our money demand is also part of our aggregate demand, there will be an increase in money demand. In addition, due to this increased government expenditure, there was an increase in income. This increase in income should also correspond to an increase in money demand. We have previously said that if there is an increase in money demand, economic agents such as households would want to gather money by selling the bonds that they already have at their hand. So this is to say, households would go to the bond market and they would try to sell the bonds in order to generate money so that they can satisfy their increased money demand. This would result in excess supply of bond in the bonds market, and we have already said that the economic relationship between supply and price is that if there is an excess supply, price would decrease, and in this case the bond price would decrease. If bond price decreases, we have already said that the yield would increase and interest rate would also increase. So this is why we have to indicate the interest rate here in our ISLM model, saying that the new interest rate at our new equilibrium B is IB, which is higher than the initial interest rate IA. So with this, we have actually looked at the short-run scenario of ASAD model and ISLM model. We would then move on to we have looked at the scenario where the prices are constant, and we would look at now a scenario where we have a short-run equilibrium in ASAD model. So we have initially mentioned that interest rate increased. So if interest rate increased, there would be a decrease in investment, as we have already discussed in our previous exercise sessions. If there is a high interest rate, people would tend to invest less, or people would be less motivated to invest, so our investment demand would decrease. So this is again to say our demand is reducing due to the interest rate, which we have called the interest rate induced crowding out effect. So this is indicated by our shift in the aggregate demand curve, where we can indicate it as from point B, we are actually shifting to a new point C because interest rate is reduced and investment demand reduced. We would have a new equilibrium at point C with a corresponding price level of PC. So here, don't forget that we have a price level of PA, which is equal to PB at a constant price scenario, where we have said our aggregate demand shifted outwards to AD1 due to the government expenditure, and our IS shifted from IS0 to IS1, and we have reached point B with a new interest rate of IB and income level of YB. However, at point B, we have a higher interest rate. Because of this higher interest rate, our investment demand would decrease. So aggregate demand would decrease simultaneously to move to a point in our ASAD diagram, which is represented by point C. And at point C, we have a new equilibrium indicated with a price level of C, and income level of point C would be YC. So the reduction from income of YB to YC should be represented as the interest rate crowding out of investment. So we have seen that the price level in our ASAD diagram increased from PA to PB, PA and PB to PC, so price level actually increased. This would have an implication in our money market, and this is again to say if price level increases, our money supply or our real money supply, which is represented by the formula M divided by P, would actually decrease. So this is to say the reduction in real money supply is caused by the increase in price, because our real money supply is having a formula of M divided by P, and if P is increasing, the whole term M divided by P is decreasing. So this is indicated again by a shift of LM curve from LM0 to LM1, since we are saying there is an increase in price from PA or PB to PC. So this decrease of LM curve from LM0 to LM1 is actually caused by the increase in our price level from PA or PB to the new price level PC. Here, as you can see, we have a new equilibrium, which is indicated as C in our ISLM model, and this corresponds to the point C in ASAD model. Here again, we have an increased interest rate, which is to be represented by IC. And this point C indicates that there is a higher interest rate. Investment demand would decrease even more, so we would have a second crowding out effect at point C, and this point C in our ASAD and ISLM model is considered as the short-run equilibrium in ASAD model, because in point C we have an equilibrium between ASAD and we have also an equilibrium between LM and IS. So this is to say we have at point C a short-run equilibrium in both models. However, here you have to notice that there is a higher interest rate, because we had initially IA at initial equilibrium of IA, and we have now a new interest rate IC, which is higher than IA at our equilibrium point C. However, this is also going hand in hand with the increase in income, because we had YA at our initial equilibrium point A, and now we have YC at our new short-term equilibrium point C. So with this, we would shift to the medium-term analysis of the ISLM curve or the ASAD model in general. So in the medium term, as we have seen that there is an increase in the price from PB to PC, And here there should be an adjustment in the price expectation. Initially, we had said there was a constant price, so economic agents were expecting a price which is in the range of PA and PB. However, we have now seen there is an increase in price which is PC. So here there is an expectation that price would increase in the future. So this is again to say there is an adjustment of price expectation, and price expectation is higher at this medium term. So how do we capture this price expectation in our ASAD model is that if economic agents expect a higher price at the next period, so let's say if you are expecting a higher price at the next month, as a producer, you would decrease your supply and you would try to produce more at a later point where price would be high. So this is again to say supply would decrease because price expectations are high. If I am expecting a higher price at the next period, I would preferably produce in the next period and I would reduce my supply in the current period. So that is reflected in a move of our aggregate supply curve from AS0 to AS1. So the move from AS0 to AS1 is actually caused by the increase in price expectation here. So on the new equilibrium here, as you can see, we have moved AS0 to AS1, and we have a new point which is represented by D. And at point D, since supply decreased, we have a new price level which should be represented by price PD. So this indicates that there is still a higher price, or there is still an increase in price. This increase in price would again be impacting our ISLM model. We have initially said that if price increases, our real money supply would decrease, since our real money supply is represented by the formula M divided by P. So this is again to say if price is increasing from PC to PD, our LM curve would shift outwards more to indicate this decrease. So we would have a new LM curve, LM2, and this decrease of LM curve by to the point LM2 is actually caused by the increase in price from PC to PD. So here again we would have a new equilibrium, which is point D in our ISLM curve, and this point D is also having a corresponding interest rate which is higher than what we have already seen, and this should be also represented by an interest rate ID. However, at point D, our income is actually equal to our initial income YA. So here we have seen that there is actually a return of production level to its initial point from YB to YC and then again to YA, or YD is equal to YA. So we have maintained our production level to its natural level. But we have had seen that there is an increase from price A and B to price D in compared to the initial equilibrium of A. And again, there is also a higher interest rate from IA to ID in compared to the initial equilibrium of point A. So with this, we would actually conclude our first part of ASAD model, expansionary fiscal policy. To wrap up, in general, we have started with a constant price where government expenditure is increasing and leading to an increase in income. This increase in income is also again captured by the increase in money demand. The increase in money demand is captured by the increase in interest rate at our ISLM model, and we have said that price level was constant, so we landed at point B in the beginning. We moved on to the short-run equilibrium where interest rate had risen and interest rate increase had resulted in decrease of investment demand. So we had seen that there is a reduction of aggregate demand from point B to point C, and due to this reduction of aggregate demand from point B to point C, we have seen that there was an increase in price. Price increased from PA or PB to point PC, and that increase in price had impacted our LM or our money market because our real money supply decreased because of the increase in price. So we have shifted our LM from LM0 to LM1, and at this equilibrium point C, which is called the short-run equilibrium of ASAD model, we have seen that there was a high income of YC, a high interest rate of IC, and a high price level of PC. And then we have moved on to the medium run equilibrium where price expectations should be adjusted due to the given scenarios, and when price expectations were adjusted or when price expectations were increased, aggregate supply decreased to aggregate supply 1, and the decrease of aggregate supply to aggregate supply 1 gave us a new equilibrium at point D where we had a new price level of PD. This again resulted in an increase of price from PC to PD. So this more increase of price again led to the fact that our real money supply would decrease. So we have shifted our LM from LM1 to LM2. So the price increase from PC to PD resulted our shift of the LM curve from LM1 to LM2. So in general, we have started with AS-AD0, AS0 and AD0, and IS0 and LM0. And finally, we have ended up at a point where we have AD1, which shifted outwards or which increased. And we had ended up at AS1, which decreased actually. And in the ISLM model, we have seen that IS increased from IS0 to IS1, whereas LM decreased first to LM1 and then to the final point of LM2. At our final equilibrium point D, in comparison to the initial equilibrium point A, we had a similar level of income, which was represented by YD is equal to YA. However, at our new equilibrium point D, we had a higher interest rate of ID and a higher price level of PD.